approved the medium-term expenditure framework for 2025 to 2027, with a proposed budget of 47.9 trillion naira for the year 2025. The minister disclosed this, and that's the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagodo, while briefing State House correspondents at the end of FEC's meeting presided over by President Bola Tinubu. The minister said the approval is part of the medium-term expenditure framework for 2025 to 2027. In accordance with the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, Mr. Bagodo also disclosed that FEC pegged the price of crude at $75 per barrel, exchange rate at 1,400 naira to a dollar, and projected oil production at 2.06 million barrels per day. The minister added that with the growth rate of 3.19%, which is expected in the second quarter of 2024, the federal government will continue to tackle inflation, strengthen economic resilience, and provide more support for the economy. Well, let's talk to Inyo Hussein. He is the head of research and policy advisory at Budget. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on the program.
Yeah, thank you, Tolu. Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Yes, indeed, it's really good to see you again. Well, let's start with this new document that we've seen, 47.9 trillion naira. It's a lot of money, but let's look at what has happened before we even got here. What do you make of our present budget? We are still running the 2024 budget, and we see that debt service and all of that is becoming more alarming, and many are worried about this. Let's do an overview of this document before we move into the spending plan for 2025.
Yeah, thanks, Tolu. I mean, it was a sigh of relief for us, who are accountability actors in the public financial management space, to have a semblance of, what's going on with the finances of the federal government as it is. It was very difficult to read the macro fiscal outlook. As you know, the budget implementation report for 2024, often released by the Budget Office of the Federation, has not been released. So it was difficult for us to have a sense with regards to how well government was doing in raising revenues, spending those revenues, and then managing our debt with regards to our debt service obligations. But the MTF recently released sort of, points the light in where exactly things, or how exactly things have gone. With regards to debt service, we see an increasing obligation for Nigeria with regards to debt service. As at August last year, it would seem that we had spent over 8 trillion naira in servicing our debt. And looking at the MTF document, it's also projected that our debt service obligations would increase to about 15 trillion naira in 2025, as the case may be. On revenue itself, somewhat progress from what it was in the past. As at August, it's showing that we've done about 12 trillion. But if you look at the disaggregated numbers, as the case may be, with regards to oil revenue and what informed government, overly ambitious optimism with regards to what it can raise, as oil revenue in 2025. For 2023, it's showing full year 2.3 trillion naira oil revenue. For the first 7 months, it's showing that we've raised about 4 trillion naira from that sector. So one wonders what is driving the optimism that we would have the capacity to raise 19 trillion naira in 2025, especially if you put that side by side with what the production volumes have been. I mean, the average production volume for the third quarter of 2024, that's as at the end of September 2024, we're still averaging about 1.55 million barrels per day, and this is including condensates, as the case may be. Pure crude oil is still doing 1.3 million barrels per day. So one wonders, where that optimism would be coming from. But with regards to non-oil revenue, of course, this has been the bright spot over the last couple of years. And with the tax bills sitting before the National Assembly, this is one area where we think that if those bills are passed, that we expect significant, increases, especially as, it regards to the value-added taxes, also to customs revenue, as the case may be. As you know, if you have interacted with those bills, there's a recommendation to establish a national revenue service that would move away the revenue collection function of the Nigeria Customs Service and the Nigerian Port Authority to the National Revenue Service. And this, we believe, should plug a lot of leakages that currently exist within the current regime, and have more revenues flowing to the pool of government. With regards also to solid minerals revenue, we also see that there's increased optimism from what used to be in the past. I mean, we have never done more than 7 billion naira in solid minerals revenue, regardless of the fact that we are blessed, in commercial quantity of different solid minerals across the length and breadth of this federation. But we've not been able to optimize the potentials of that sector with regards to creating the right regulatory, environment to be able to drive investments in that area and to be able to, rally the agencies of government that should, formulate policy and drive policy in that area to drive investments for us to be able to maximize the gains of that sector. But it's interesting that the federal government is saying that they would be able to, raise up to 15 billion naira in that regard from that sector. So we are looking forward to see what it has the capacity to do with regards to that. Coming to expenditure, we also see that for 2023, it's been able to spend 23 billion naira, trillion naira as the case may be, for the 2023 fiscal year. But as you know, with the 4 different budgets that are implemented concurrently, which has, created some confusion with regards to, what exactly is implemented for which year, it's not certain what, a fraction of the budget for 2024 has been implemented. But with regards to the January to August period, it's showing that the federal government has spent 16 trillion naira. But this also points to another problem with reporting of revenue and expenditures, because if you look at the fiscal accounts, that's the report put out by the Office of the Accountant General on the Open Treasury Portal, is showing that between January and September, the federal government had spent about 14 trillion naira, across the different MDAs. So there's need for the federal government and all its agencies responsible for the fiscal reporting to harmonize the different accounts with regards to what has been raised and spent, so that we have a common position on exactly what government has raised in terms of revenue, what it has spent for recurrent debt, recurrent non-debt, or the capital expenditure component of the budget.
Brilliant breakdown there. I like that. Staying now with this document for 2025, you've touched on crude oil price, $75 per barrel. That seems conservative enough. Or what do you think? Exchange rate at 1,400. Well, I don't know how feasible that is, considering what we have at the moment. But many will tell you that is also a bit fair. You talked about crude oil production. I know as at last week, we got a report from the NNPCL that production has hit about 1.8 million barrels, including condensates. They are aiming towards 2 million before the end of the year. We don't know how possible that will be, but we heard from the National Oil Company that there's been increased production. But my question really would be the actuality of this document. Do you see it being not 100%, but what do you think of, if properly implemented, what do you see as the positives in this? Now, let's now look at proper implementation.
So, looking at the fundamentals, yes, the federal government took a conservative stance on the oil price. Brent is doing about $73 per barrel today. So we have our projections at $75, dollars per barrel for the 2025 fiscal year. It's somewhat realistic, within the realm of realism. Where I have a problem is with the production numbers. What you quoted that was released by the NNPC, the 1.8 million barrels per day, has not reflected in the output numbers put out by the NUPRC. I still looked at the numbers yesterday, as at September 2023, 2024, we're still doing 1.5 million barrels per day, including condensates. So maybe the updated figures for October or November would reflect what you have said. But based on that, I still think that the projections for 2 million barrels per day is overly optimistic and overly ambitious, because those legacy issues that have bedeviled that sector with regards to increased investment in that sector, over time, is not one that would, abate very quickly. We still have issues with oil theft that have not been conclusively dealt with. As I speak to you, I don't know anybody who is currently being prosecuted for theft. There have been seizures here and there. There have been blowing up of vessels here and there, but no concrete, step with regards to addressing that menace, headlong. With regards to inflation as well, of course, inflation has huge implications for your revenue and expenditure, as the case may be. Even if inflation has tapered between June 2024, when it was at, a high of 34% to about 32.4%. But I do not think that a lot can happen between now and 2025 to bring it out to 15.75%. And it's important that we're able to get our inflation targets right, because this often has a huge implication for expenditure as well. With regards to expenditure, also, with the challenges, we have in that regard, 48 trillion naira seems like a tall order, right? Especially if you look at the fact that between January and August, we've only been able to disburse about 16 trillion. And as you know, expenditure is tied with this regime. It would seem that they want to tie expenditure strictly to revenue, meaning that there has been effort, by virtue of what the statements that have been made, we have not seen it with regards to actual, reports with regards to the fiscal accounts or the audited financial statements of the CBN. But with regards to positions taken verbally, it would seem that the federal government is moving away from the ways and means financing, meaning that it has to rely solely on, what is able to raise as revenue and raise domestically, through domestic borrowing, and what you can get through foreign borrowing as well. But if we are going to be relying strictly on revenues, and we agree that the revenues seem, overly optimistic, especially with regards to oil revenue, where we expect 19 trillion naira in 2025, we know that when we are not able to raise those revenues, it constrains what we have the capacity to spend. And so I'm not overly optimistic that we would be able to do 48 trillion naira in 2025. And this has huge implications for budget credibility, service delivery, because as you know, when we're not able to raise enough revenues to finance fully our expenditure, the government begins to prioritize. And oftentimes are not, what government prioritizes is not often the priorities of the average person. So if you look at healthcare, education, budget performance over time, especially in years where the capacity to raise revenue has not been optimal, those critical social sectors have suffered. And so for areas that do not have direct impact on the lives and livelihoods of Nigerians, are areas where the federal government has often prioritized. So it's important that we bring our budget within the realm of realism, so that the plans, for those social sectors, critical social sectors, for critical infrastructure that should drive investment, drive economic growth, improve human capital development, that there is enough resources deployed in that area, to be able to deliver, the promises with regards to those areas, as the case may be. And so I expect that, moving into the budget proper, because this is supposed to inform the budget, that government has some conversations about how realistic these projections are, for the 2025 fiscal year.
FAC also obviously is on the high side, and we see what's happening. 32 states, from my research, need FAC for at least 55% of their total revenue, while about 14 states would use FAC for only like 70% of their total revenue. So FAC is also very important here, and we've seen a huge increase in FAC. What are your expectations from subnationals moving forward? Because many say that we need to have this handshake. This time around, not on the fiscal and the monetary side, But the federal government and the subnationals must be in tune. That's talking about how to get across to the people. Let's talk about this. Mr. Singh, what do you make of it?
I mean, we need to fully operationalize our fiscal federalism, where, the subnational units or the federating units are allowed to operate, at full scale. What does it mean? This means that, all of the productive capacities where the states have comparative advantage, they are supposed to fully maximize, those potentials as the case may be. And this is why I was a bit set back when a number of states moved against, that provision in the new tax bills, for derivation, for the share of derivation from VAT going to the states to increase. Because I believe this is supposed to drive subnational competitiveness at that level. It's true that the headquarters effect as presently operated, favors some states, but some components of that bill, or the components of that bill, also speak to the fact that attribution would also come into play, meaning that where goods are consumed would also be brought into play with regards to attributing VAT to those places as well. And so we expect that states, would be able to mobilize revenues domestically by, aligning with these provisions of the bill, by also digitizing collection in the different states. In this present day and age, I do not see the reason why cash collection should still be a major way of collecting, taxes, levies, and fees. I mean, there are countries where, even using USSD, Kenya is there, people are able to use short codes to buy fuel, to be able to pay, ticket fees, whether it's at airports or car parks. And so in this day and age, we should have no business exchanging cash, where to pay for any kind of service. As you know, these kind of systems are prone to, leakages, as the case may be, when you have individuals or non-state actors interfacing with cash on behalf of the state. It's also important that the states need to fully operationalize their treasury single account. That era when one state government would have more than 300 accounts, run by different MDAs of government, where government is not able to have a complete view of what, their, inflow is and outflow is with regards to how they raise revenue and spend those revenues, should come to an end. I mean, there's technology at our disposal to be able to automate all of these processes and ensure that what is due government, comes into government. Consequence management, like I always say, the right accountability mechanisms in place is what we expect states to drive. In this day and age as well, the state governments cannot accommodate, or should not be able to tolerate, corruption or, misappropriation of funds, as the case may be. I mean, if you walk on the streets of Nigeria, across every local government, every community, you see hungry people, meaning that the role of government, has become ever, very important as the case may be. Our people need social protection. They need to be able to afford, healthcare, be able to afford education. They need to be able to have the right business environment to be able to thrive, whether it's having access to, electricity, having access to good roads, having digital access to be able to drive their small businesses. Issues around, multiplicity of taxes. These are also areas where small businesses cannot afford the multiplicity of taxes, right? It's a burden on small businesses, erodes their profit margins, erodes their revenues, as the case may be, and it reduces the potential of small businesses to be able to drive the economy as it is in a lot of countries across the world. And so these are areas where we think that, states should be able to come to the party. If you also look at agriculture, as that is supposed to be the mainstay across different states, states, need to stop paying lip service to that sector. If you look at the budget of the different state governments across board, there's barely any states that allocates up to 5% of its annual budget to the agricultural sector. And their needs, whether it's with regards to agricultural inputs, farming implements, agricultural extension services across board. Nigeria has one of the lowest yield per hectares for several, agricultural products across the value chain. And there are several intervention areas that we expect that the state governments should be able to come to play, as it regards the respective economies of their states.
Very interesting. Let's do this in 2 minutes. What about the social investment program, which we now see the federal government trying to re-establish as an establishment bill before the assembly? What do you make of that? I think it's going to be out of the humanitarian ministry.
I think it's important that the government creates a proper framework for social investment, social protection. I've never been a fan of cash transfers, and that's because we don't have a robust data, database management regime in place. And so what has happened with that regime is that you find people who are not supposed to be beneficiaries benefiting from those sort of transfer programs, and it has not lifted people out of poverty. And so for us to be able to properly deploy cash transfer programs, I believe that data is at the, should be pivotal to that. And since we have not been able to harmonize all our different data points to be able to know exactly who the poor are amongst us, so that the poor can, get the support that is due them. Those social protection efforts, social investment, programs should be geared towards, other areas that can have more lasting impact on the lives of people. I mean, the CNG initiative is one that, I applaud, but that's one that needs to be, scaled, as the case may be. As you know, the increase in the price of PMS has significantly increased the transportation cost, both for individuals and for products. That has also had an inflationary effect on the economy. And so reducing the cost of, transportation by reducing the cost of the transport fuel is one that I know that would have significant impact, right, in the disposable income of people, especially people that have to transport themselves and the goods and services they offer from one place to the other. But it's important that we have a very robust, sustainable framework for delivering social protection to our people. So a bill that would help in doing that is one that is applauded.
I must thank you so much, Mr. Iniobong Hussein is the head of research and policy advisory budget. Thank you so much for your frank submissions there with regards to this topic of discourse and, of course, insights into the budgets and the figures that we expect moving on in 2025. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Tolu, and have a lovely day.
All right, then.